Thank you. Jurors, a couple of things that you have to understand, and His Honor is the umpire in the case. He calls the balls, he calls the strikes, he allows objections, excludes things, allows things. What I say is not evidence, what the DAs say is not evidence. What's evidence are what you people determine the facts of this case to be, consistent with your life experience, which is obviously very important. Because as a juror, you bring to this trial your life experience dealing with your friends, dealing with work, inferences that you can draw from evidence that you determine to be the facts. And as jurors, coming from all walks of life, you bring together that life experience and the ability to discuss, once the case is over, the evidence that has been presented, to determine whether or not the government has proven a case beyond a reasonable doubt, as His Honor instructed you what that definition of beyond a reasonable doubt means. And the high burden that is set on the government to say to a jury, this is not close, this is not more probable than not, this is not more likely than, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. And the only one that determines who is going to get charged with a crime in our society is the government. And when the government determines that they're going to charge somebody with a crime, they don't call you up and say, hey, we're thinking we're going to charge you with a crime. Do you have any input on that determination? They arrest you, and they determine, we're going to charge the person, I suggest to you, that the highest crime that is possible that can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. In this case, first-degree murder. At the end of the trial, His Honor will tell you what the law is, and he'll explain to you that there are two theories, I suspect, of murder in the first degree: premeditated, malice aforethought, cruelty, and atrocity. He'll tell you about the factors that one can consider to determine whether or not an individual has killed another human being with cruelty and atrocity with the intent to kill and taking pleasure in the death of that person. His Honor will tell you about what's called second-degree murder. His Honor may tell you about what's called voluntary manslaughter, perhaps maybe even involuntary manslaughter. That depends on the evidence that goes in to this trial, and that's entirely up to the judge. And giving you the law is entirely up to the judge, not me. At the end of the case, you're going to be able to have his instructions, and then you take the facts that you determine to exist, and you match it up to the law, and you make a decision as to whether or not the government, not the defendant, the government has proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and if so, to what degree? Now, how do you do that? Well, you come in here, you may say, I'm not really capable of determining credibility. Well, yeah, you do it every day. And you bring that life experience into the jury room. And you factor that in when you weigh the testimony of a witness. And you notice the witness stand is right here. It's right next to you. And the reason it's right next to you is so that you as consider whether or not the witness, to your determination, has a dog in the fight, as they say. Are they gilding the lily? Are they adding anything? Are they trying to portray something because they have a reason to want to portray something? That's all up to you. Credibility determinations are left to the jury. So what do we have here? You have a man who's on trial for murder, Harry Tuerk, and by the way, he's a doctor, he was a doctor, he is a doctor. He never liked to go by the term doctor. He was always Harry. You're going to hear evidence that he was always Harry, that he was a gentleman who was a urologist, dealt with kidneys, dealt with prostate, and was a surgeon. You're going to hear evidence that Harry was born in East Germany, and as a kid he grew up in East Germany. Went to the East German schools. When he graduated from high school, he went into the East German Air Force. Served in the East German Air Force for a number of years, got out, went to med school after he graduated from college. Became an accomplished physician, an accomplished surgeon. The wall came down. He was able to leave East Germany. And he, like a bat out of hell, got out of East Germany and came over to the United States. When he came over to the United States, at the age of 42, he learned English. Didn't know English. You'll hear him testify. He's going to testify in this case. Sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But he knows English, and he speaks very, very good English. Self-taught. In the United States, he became not just an accomplished surgeon, but he was one of, if not the best, as far as reputation, worldwide for robotic prostate surgery. Those hands saved hundreds of lives and took one. And he knows it. Every day he wakes up, you'll hear evidence that he thinks of Katie. Nobody's happy with something like that. You live with it. But as human beings, and His Honor, I suspect, will instruct you that you look to the circumstances that surround the taking of a life. What was involved? What happened? Like if somebody's acting to protect themselves, or if somebody's acting out of hot blood, heat of passion, or if it's an accident even on certain cases. So when Harry comes over here to the United States, and he ended up meeting Catherine McLean on Bumble, one of those websites. Nothing good ever comes from Bumble or Twitter or whatever those things are that you go on, and you're dating websites, and nothing wrong with that. You meet people. Hopefully you meet the right one, maybe, or you have fun. So you're going to hear evidence that both Katie and Harry went on this dating website. He's living by himself. He's living life large. She's been married twice before. No judgment there. He was married twice before. So now he's living in Dover. And as he's living in Dover, and by the way, you're going to see a timeline. And here's the timeline that I think is somewhat relevant. You're going to see that in November of 17, Harry and Kathleen meet online. Like most of us, they date, they have fun, they end up feeling that they had feelings for each other. March 18. 4 months later, she moves into his house. His house, you heard the government indicate her house. Well, it's her house now. It was her house, and you'll hear evidence of that. So the house was in Dover, Massachusetts. You're going to hear evidence that Harry had occasion to work on that house. It was a very nice house. Here's the house in Dover. Here's a photograph of the backyard that he worked on, the pool, the cabana, the waterfall, outside TV. You're going to see evidence of the interior of the house. Beautiful home, downstairs, huge exercise gym, huge movie theater with the movie you can watch, office space. Because in March of 18, 5 months later, Kathleen McLean and her 3 children, with Dad, Steve Roca, her 3 children move into the house, and they're living together. He's working, he's going to Boston. And as I say, he didn't like to be Dr. Tuerk. He didn't like to be referred to in any type of appellations. What he preferred was his lifestyle, which involved his Harley Davidson ×2. He was lucky enough to have 2 Harleys. And what he used to do is he used to go and do his surgery, and he never was one to want to wear, the garb with the round thing on the head and all that. He hated that stuff. He wasn't Dr. Tuerk, he was Harry. Everybody knew him. Everybody loved him. He would walk into work, and that was his attire. Harley Davidson getup. Underneath his surgical, he'd have Harley Davidson shirt. He became of such repute for St. Elizabeth. They were owned by that medical corporation. I forget. They own all the hospitals that they crashed. But in any event, he was the chief of urology. And he was such a star for them that there were billboards over the expressway in Boston. This is the guy living by himself with his 2 motorcycles, his beautiful house, runs into Kathleen McClain. In December of 19, now we're talking, March of 18 to December of 19, they get married. Drunk. He had a exposition that he had to do in Las Vegas. So they went to Las Vegas. He took her. They had a good time. Well, he's in Las Vegas and they were both intoxicated. They ended up going through the fast lane, the drive-through weddings, and ended up being able, this is not them, this is an ad, but to sit inside the pink Elvis Cadillac. Drunk in the drive-through wedding in December 19. January of 20. January of 20. Karen meets with a divorce lawyer. A woman here from Denver. Here, Elizabeth. What's a divorce? Doesn't want to be with Kathleen McClain after the 5 months or so. Doesn't want to be married. She sends him an email. She says at the end of the month, thank you for the retainer, the money that you paid her, to divorce Kathleen McClain. You can hear evidence that Kathleen McClain constantly went on his cell phone, constantly looking for whether or not he's on Bumble and Jumble or whatever it is, or whether or not he's flirting, and whether or not he's sexting, and whether or not he's having affairs, whether or not he's cheating. There's a huge portion of it. 2 days after, a letter was written by the attorney confirming the divorce retainer had been received and there was going to be a divorce. She went to court, she got a restraining order against him. Threw him out of his own home, ordered by the court because she got a restraining order. Then she filed for divorce. So now at this point, he's in a situation where he's out. Where's he going to go? He calls a friend, Charlie Lax. Charlie's a nice guy, lets him stay at his house for a period of time, but how long are you going to be able to do that? So Charlie has him leave. You're going to hear evidence that after he left Charlie Lax's house, he ended up going, his counsel kind of blithely says, well, he went off to Florida. He didn't just go off to Florida. He had nowhere to live, literally. He ended up almost homeless. The time came, and remember that horrific time when the pandemic struck all of us. It was an international event. He was in Germany prior to that because he had a job. His life was changing. He was going to Germany. He was going to be a physician in Germany. He already had a job with a university. His life was on a much better track. You're going to hear evidence that there's discussion about, well, you know, the Roca kids, they liked Dover, they liked the schools, they liked the programs. Katie didn't want to move the kids. He didn't care. Fine. Sell the house in June when the kids are done in school. He didn't care. He was out of there. She knew it. As the pandemic got worse, at his age, being a physician, obviously, all of us, I suppose, at that point were concerned. He was worried about dying. Not an unusual thing that he was worried about at the height of that pandemic, and the fear that took him by overwhelming emotion. He ended up consulting his doctor, had medication, and again, had nowhere to go. Would knock on the door, would say to a friend, can I stay with you? And they'd be like, dude, I'm sorry. No, but there's stuff going on. You're going to hear evidence from one of the government's witnesses who was a friend for a long time of Katie McClain, in 2015, I believe. Vanessa Pettigrew. Talked to her every day. There were 12,000 pages of texts that they sent back and forth to each other every day. talking about what's going on in their life, talking about, whether or not what type of fingernail polish, what type of shoes, what type of dresses. Is this trashy? Does this look good? I think it looks nice. And by the way, let's go to dinner. We're going to drink. Are you drunk? Are you okay? How's your alcohol problem? On and on and on. Meanwhile, he's reaching out to his best friend, Kurt Pfannenstein, German guy. He reaches out to Kurt, and I stay with you. You're going to see, because he texted a text that he received from Harry to Vanessa Pettigrew. So you've got Kate McLean, you've got the two planets rolling around, Kurt and Vanessa. So Harry reaches out to Kurt and says, please, can I stay with you? I need safety. I have to stay somewhere to be safe. Chris says, no, I don't think so. I can't do that. But he sent that to Vanessa, and the two of them said, it's too bad. He had a lawyer, good lawyer, real good guy. John Hoffman was representing him. John was dealing with her lawyer. And John would send, you'll see the emails, he'd send letters in the course of the negotiations. Can he please stay in the basement? It's his house. Can he stay in the basement? Put a lock on the door. And you'll see text between Kate McLean and Vanessa about Harry wants to stay in the basement, LOL. Harry wants to stay in the basement. He's not. It's not her house. His house. But he now has to find a place to stay. Stays in Boston, one little bedroom with a friend. And the friend, board of trustees, you can hear evidence, wanted him out because of the pandemic. He went to Florida. In Florida, he stayed in a rusty, nasty trailer that a friend Bob Ingham let him stay in until Bob sold the trailer. In the interim, there were negotiations about reconciliation. And the negotiations basically were pretty simple. Kate McLean, who I submit you're going to hear, had a little house in Sudbury with a flooded basement and a lot of problems to it, but a $400,000 house that was underwater, that was being foreclosed on, that ultimately gets sold pre-foreclosure. Now she's living in that house in Dover. So she wanted on the deed. She wanted on the deed, and she wanted a post-up. She wanted him to sign something that would give her half ownership in the property, and that's where David Keighton comes in. David Keighton, you'll hear from Zoom, was an attorney and a friend of Kate McLean's, and he talked every day, as many of her friends want to do, would talk sexting to her. At one point, getting somewhat descriptive about various sex acts and talking about the property. And he prepares the deed and she records the deed. He records the deed and she says, by the way, if he dies, do I get everything? So as time goes by, in the interest of reconciliation, he signs a deed. Signs it and puts her on the property. She owns half that property. Look at the date. 29th of April, 2020. Signed a post-up agreement, giving her $100,000, paying the lawyer's fees. You're going to see text messages between Vanessa, his best friend Kurt. You're going to see text messages with Kurt, that while Kurt was talking to him about trying to mediate between Katie McLean and Harry and trying to get things to work out, that he was sexting her, and she's responding. Ultimately, he's sending her what's referred to in the vernacular as dick pics, and she's sending him pictures of her breasts while she's in a bathtub. And this guy's going to be right up here on that witness stand. Can't wait. That's his best friend, Kurt. So as time goes by, Harry now comes back to Massachusetts, has nerve problems in his leg, and needs help. Roca, by the way, was persona non grata with Katie, ends up together, the two of them, pick up Harry, bring him to Denver, who stays in a hotel. While he's in the hotel, Katie is with him getting water, food, things of that nature. He has a restraining order. It says, don't worry about the restraining order. Come on back home, because he signed the deed. Come on back home, we're going to be a family again. She files documents with an attorney. You're going to hear from Mike Thaler, who's an attorney here in Dedham, filing, dismissing, restraining orders. Life is good. Harry's going to come back home. They have that nice night the DA was talking about. They're playing a board game with the kids. They're drinking. They're having martinis. Then they have whiskey. Then they have an argument. Then they go upstairs to the bedroom. That's where they go upstairs, and the DA says that he, with his anger, decided that he was going to murder her. Well, that's a good life choice, huh? No, what actually happened, and you'll see the evidence is pretty clear, that what happens is they're in the bedroom, and they're arguing. And she's talking about the other men. She's got hundreds of guys after her on these websites. And do you think I really loved you? Do you think I really loved you? I'm calling the police tomorrow. You're getting out of here. They got in the course of an argument. She had a rocks glass in her hand. She had her cell phone in the other hand. He got on his knees. He said, Katie, please don't. She smashed the rocks glass off his head, the right side of his head, not the left side like the police think. At that point, with one hand, the size of that hand, the strength of that hand, he grabbed her, snapped the highway, she died. You're going to hear evidence from Dr. Lapasada, pathologist from Rhode Island. Dr. Lapasada will tell you that a lot of what appears to be in any of these pictures that His Honor asked you about, can you handle looking at these pictures that are not pleasant? There's twigs and leaves and stuff on the pond. There's what appears to be bluish skin on the face. A lot of that is from lying face down in the pond, in the pooling of blood, post-mortem. You're going to hear evidence that death was within seconds. He panics, doesn't know what to do. This is post-homicide conduct. The deed is done. What's for you to determine is, can the government show you and prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that this was not killing in hot blood or heat of passion, second conduct, as opposed to premeditated malice of forethought and cruelty and atrocity. Putting someone in a pond, this is called fright or flight. Bad move. Should have called 911. Nevertheless, it was a panicked move. You're going to see that when he was in the hospital, you're going to see that he was passed out. He had a 226 blood alcohol level. District Attorney will talk to you about his statements to the police in the course of that questioning, almost as if, he's writing a presidential speech and has all of his wits about him. This is what he looked like when the police first went into the hospital. That's what he looked like. He was passed out. He was coming out of it. Medication, significantly intoxicated. Medical records indicating that the doctors at Norwood believed it was attempted suicide by alcohol poisoning. In the course of talking to the police, and you're going to hear the audio, you're going to see, I submit to you, that he was confused with a lot of questions, but nevertheless was trying to be a gentleman, was trying to be cooperative. Police officers noticed his wrist. He tried to kill himself in a state of despondency. Total misery. That, members of the jury, is the evidence that will be presented to you, and ultimately at the end of the case, it's up to you to determine whether or not the government has proven this case to what degree, if any, beyond a reasonable doubt. And you heard the magistrate, Margaret, indicate to you that you as a jury pass between the defendant. Even though we call people that are charged with a crime a defendant, the person, as His Honor said, doesn't have to defend against anything. Government's burden of proof, but nevertheless, you as a jury pass between the defendant and the Commonwealth, the DA's office, the police, crime labs, all the rest of it. You pass between the government and the defendant who has placed himself on his country, which country you are. And that she then went on and said, and you are charged with hearing the evidence on your oath that you took as jurors. And we are confident and appreciate, because it is a service, when jurors come and you take time out of your lives, knowing that that protects all of us, that we have a right to go before a jury of our peers to determine whether or not the government has proven a case beyond a reasonable doubt. At the end of the case, you get a chance to do a closing argument. Again, what I say is not evidence. What the DA says is not evidence. What's evidence is what you hear from here, photographs, exhibits, things of that nature. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If we're going to pass out the notebooks and pens at this time, I'm just going to see counsel at sidebar, please.